Hello, I'm here with Richard Feynman, and today I'm going to ask him a couple questions about his life. So, can you tell me a little bit about the Schrödinger equation?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about the Schrödinger equation. I refer to a lot of that, the great era of human intellect and awakening, because it really helps us see the real phenomena that goes on in chemistry. And I think his equation really lets us know just what kind of world that we live in.
Okay, so you were a teacher. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did to encourage your students?
I don't know if my students knew what was going on half the time I was teaching them, but I don't know. I don't know any way to really judge their intellect based on them. I don't know. I hope they enjoyed what I had to say.
Okay. Can you tell me what you see in science?
What do I see in science? That's an easy and that's a hard question, because you have to wrap your mind around kind of a lot about what beauty is and how I see it in science. For instance, like a flower. As you walk past a flower, you may think to yourself like, oh, well, that's just a flower, it's beautiful, you just see what's on the outside. But as a scientist, you get to really dig deep and see, break down all the parts of that flower and see what it does and see what its role is in its environment, and really just be able to see 100% of the beauty of what's on the inside and the outside instead of just what's on the outside.
Can you tell me a little bit about the Manhattan Project?
Yeah, the Manhattan Project was a project involving the U.S. building an atomic bomb to take out some of our enemies in World War II. I got into this project just a little ways out of college, and it was a big challenge. There were some big shoes to fill. I was lucky to get into the position that I had there, and I was able to work with a lot of prestigious and very well-known scientists now. And the project really opened my eyes to just what chemistry was about, in a way. Not maybe all it was about, but just the power it could have in so many ways on people's lives. Obviously, I did play some jokes on many of the people I work with. I always love to keep things lively there. I would go out and play my drums at the back of the facility because it just got so boring out there in El Paso. There was nothing to do out there. But shortly after the project, I realized that maybe all my work had been almost in vain, even though we had worked so hard, and really it was just a bunch of innocent lives being killed. And I felt very bad afterwards, but I also felt that I made a very important stride in the field of science that could possibly help others in the future.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your family?
My family, of all the people in my family, I was very close to my sister, who I grew up with in my later years. She came along when I was just in my early 20s, but she was she wanted to learn a lot about the world, just as I did when I was her age, so I felt that we always had a very special connection. She went on to become an astrophysicist. She loved to study the stars, and we always had a great time together.
That's good. Can you tell me a little bit about the Challenger disaster?
The Challenger disaster was something I took on in my later years. It involved a NASA spacecraft exploding just before it got out of the atmosphere. And a lot of people were sent in to investigate. NASA had to do a report, but as you might guess, NASA didn't cover many of the details. It was very easy to make everything very broad and just say, well, we messed up and some people died. But the bigger part of that disaster would most definitely be just how faulty the aircraft was put together, things that happened years before the shuttle even went off, things that happened in production, things that happened prepping the material, things that went wrong that could have been seen, things that could have been prevented, and maybe this disaster would never have happened, such as things like avionics, the fin, the wings, things like that that could have been much more well handled by the people working on that aircraft.
Can you tell us how the theories are going to change in the future?
As far as theories getting more crazy and mathematical, I would say the odds are against it. For one thing, you need the math just to understand what's been done so far. Beyond that, the behavior of subnuclear systems is so strange compared to the ones the brain evolved to deal with that the analysis has to be very abstract. To understand ice, you have to understand things that are themselves very unlike ice. Faraday's models were mathematical springs and wires and tense bands in space, and his images were from basic geometry. I think we've understood all that we can from his point of view. What we found in this century is different enough, obscure enough, that further progress will require a lot of math.
If you could compare theories to something in the world, anything, what would it be?
I think chess paints a really good example, even though it may come off as like the most boring board game in the world. It represents a lot of things that you can kind of demonstrate. Like, for instance, the king can move so many squares this way, so many squares that way, so many, like, each little pawn has its own set of movements, its own color, where it can and cannot go. Which pawn or which item is stronger than the other one. Kind of like in chemistry, when we think of a theory, the pawn can move on squares of that certain color. The knight can beat certain other things. And, you know, it's kind of like a theory of like, okay, we know this is going to happen, it always happens. But then when you get something weird, something that isn't supposed to happen, for instance, if a piece on the chessboard has a new property, a new law, something changes, then you have to go back and think, wait, then was what we were thinking, is that true? Are we still thinking correctly? Is that still right? And then you start to get deeper, you start to think deeper, you can understand things better when different things happen, and it throws everybody off board, and you have to start again thinking like, okay, how did this happen? How can we observe it again? How can we think differently about this? How has this changed other things? Is this going to happen again? Are other things going to change? So it's always neat to keep your eyes open for those kinds of things. Also, you kind of get, you know, those like chemical like revolution kind of things going, where you have something that's acted the same way for so long, and then it's like, well, this could be added to it or changed, or it changes, or it does something different, or you find that when you put two and two together, they change and they're not the same anymore. So it's ever changing, and you begin to learn more about how it works and how it's supposed to work, and the different cool things that you can put together to figure out how you can make it work better, or how the things inside of it operate, or being able to understand it better so you can appreciate it more.